Every living organism requires some certain condition to grow, multiply, and survive. So also microorganisms they require chemical and physical requirement to grow, maintain its progeny, and survive. One of the most important characteristics of microorganisms is their ability to grow and replicate. This is a property, a characteristic of living things for both complex and microbial cells. Before microorganisms form a colony of single bacteria or a consortium of different species of bacteria, they both require the chemical and physical requirement to grow and survive. At the end of this very class, you are expected to list all the category of physical requirement for bacterial growth and chemical requirement, and you are expected to explain one each from those categories. You are expected to give an insight on why bacteria are classified into different groups based on their ability to tolerate temperature. Chemical requirement for microbial growth. For microorganisms to grow successfully, they require supply of water, mineral element, growth factors, gas, such as oxygen. This is also applicable to complex organisms, most especially human beings. We require some natural requirements such as water, potable water, sufficient food substances, and shelter, oxygen. These things make human beings survive. So also microorganisms will require carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, oxygen, and other important elements such as iron to grow, multiply, and maintain its progeny. Carbon. Carbon is the backbone of so many food substances and nutritional requirements for the survival of organisms. Likewise, microorganisms they require the carbon both in artificial form during culture and natural form that they are able to synthesize or taken for their growth and development. This carbon is found in both protein, fat, carbohydrate, and lipid. In lipid, there is a backbone of carbon in the structure of glycerol. Likewise, in protein, most of the amino acids consist a particular group of carbon on its structure. Like so, glucose, it has a carbon in its structure and it divided the entire glucose. This carbon is strategically located in the molecular structure of most food substances and other related matter. Nitrogen. Nitrogen is very essential also in the growth and development of not just microorganisms or complex organisms, but also plants and their species. It is important in the synthesis of protein, amino acid, and DNA and RNA. You can see here in the base phase of the DNA, there is a nitrogen group in adenine. In adenine, there is in thymine. In guanine, there is in cytosine, and there is in thymine. Bacteria that obtain nitrogen from the atmosphere are termed the nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And some category of microorganisms enjoy the nitrogen that is fixed from the environment. And these are called the Rhizobium species and Azobacter species. Phosphorus. This is also an essential element as it is strategically placed on nucleic acid. It is synthesized for the construction of the phospholipid. Phospholipid is a very important lipid found in the membrane of most bacteria, of all bacteria. Phosphorus is a constituent of high energy compound, the ATP, adenosine triphosphate. there is 3 molecules of phosphate in ATP, 1 ribosose sugar, and an adenine group. And this ATP is synthesized by all microorganisms that have the capability to metabolize food substances from carbohydrate, amino acid, and lipid. Oxygen. Oxygen is very essential to all living organisms, from plant, animal, microorganism, and complex organism. Some microorganisms are classified based on their requirement for oxygen. As we all know, microorganisms, they are found everywhere and in every environment and habitat. Tools, they were strategically classified to adapt to the supply of oxygen. The normal microorganisms that dwell in the body, in the microbiota of human being, are most often aerophilic in nature. They can survive only when there is sufficient supply of oxygen. This oxygen is also important as a final electron receptor in the electron transport chain. After the transfer of electron in the electron transport chain, the oxygen stands to accept the final electron to produce ATP and water. The aerobic microorganism, oxygen is an absolute requirement for their energy yielding properties. Certain microorganisms, however, did not require oxygen to grow and develop. And those anaerobic microorganisms trace element. As human beings require basic element for their growth and development and maintenance of perfect health, so also microorganisms require trace element such as iron, copper, and zinc for their growth and development. These elements often are used in the synthesis of enzymes and other cofactors. Organic growth factors such as vitamins may also require by certain microorganisms. These trace elements are usually the constituent of amino acid, purines, and furimidines. The physical requirement for bacterial growth. The second category for requirement required by microorganisms to grow and develop the physical requirement. These are the environmental factors that are very essential in the maintenance of bionic body and adaptation to the environment. These include temperature, pH, osmotic pressure, and salinity. pH. The pH is the extent of acidity or alkalinity. Is the concentration of acid or base in certain solution. For most bacteria, the optimum pH is between 6.5 to 7.5 at the pH range, and these are termed the neutrophilic. Those category of microorganisms that survive under 6.5 to 7.5 are called neutrophilic microorganism, and they are usually found in the microbiota of human being. They are most acquainted bacteria. They include Escherichia coli, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and Streptococcus pneumoniae. Likewise, there are group of bacteria that prefer to survive under acid condition, most often within 1 to 6 pH level. And this category of microorganisms include Acetobacter aceti, Thiobacillus prosperus. And there are those that survive within 7.5 to 12 pH level, and these they are called alkanophilic bacteria. An example of this include Bacillus pseudophilus and Bacillus holodurans. Osmotic pressure. Microorganisms are not much tolerant to sodium chloride because of the concentration and the isotropic nature of sodium chloride. At optimum, certain microorganisms at an equilibrium concentration of sodium chloride, they survive and do good. At 1% cell within the cytoplasm and 1% cell outside the cytoplasm, they maintain a condition called the isotonic condition, where there is equilibrium concentration of sodium chloride. However, at hypertonic condition, where the sodium chloride outside the cell is much higher in concentration than the cytoplasm, there will be migration of water from the cytoplasm to the environment of the cell, thus it will cause shrinking of the cell. And a condition where the concentration of salt within the cytoplasm is much higher than the concentration of the salt outside the cell, the water will migrate toward the cytoplasm, thus the cell will engorge and subsequently burst. At this condition, therefore, osmotic pressure is strategically classified into hypotonic, isotonic, and hypotonic condition. Most preferably, the bionic environment where most microorganisms dwell in the body, they survive at isotonic condition. Thank you for listening. Go through it and subscribe to my channel.